please.
Questions, if I could.
Yeah, go ahead. You know what? Go ahead.
The
Sure.
Wall Street Journal.
Doctor.
So I wanted to clarify something because just a week ago, you all were standing here telling us that unless you had sustained contact with somebody who was symptomatic for COVID-19, you really didn't need to worry. From the president, the vice president, that if they shook hands with somebody who had this, if they took a photograph with somebody who had this, they didn't really need to worry. And yet, several days later, we're in a situation where people are being told, don't leave your houses. There are curfews saying you cannot walk alone at night after a certain time. Can you walk us through what seems like a very dramatic swing, a very dramatic disconnect from what we were hearing before to what we're hearing now?
So two things. We look at data all the time, and I know you're looking at the China and South Korea data. And when you look at China and South Korea data and you look what China and South Korea did, you can see that their curves are not only blunted outside of Wuhan, so the Chinese areas outside of Wuhan, blunted curve, and South Korea, blunted curve. If you look at their curve today, they're already on the far end of their epidemic curve. Of course, none of those countries are fully back to work, and so that's what we worry about too. Secondly, there was a series of scientific articles published, and I know you've seen them too, about surface contamination. I think none of us really understood the level of surface piece. So we're still working out how much is it by human-human transmission and how much is it by surface. And this is why those fundamental guidelines were put out that says don't expose yourself to surfaces outside the home. Basically what those guidelines are is don't expose yourself to excess number of persons who could be asymptomatic and infected, and then the person-to-person contact, and don't expose yourself to surfaces that could have had the virus on it, for which on hard surfaces, I know we had the cardboard issue about shipping, hard surfaces, not shown in fabric as much or in cardboard, but hard surface transmission. These are issues that we haven't had to deal with before with the level of respiratory infections, and that's why we have this concern, and that's why the president put out the guidelines. And so it's to cover both of those pieces. That's all new science, all new models. I think many of you have the Imperial study available and looked at the impact of those. That's the first time those have been modeled as a comprehensive approach to mitigating an epidemic.
Hey, Dr. Burns, yesterday,